All right, so we're making some progress here on the lecture and as well on our speeches. Hopefully you're getting a little bit of your ideas churning away, and that's going to make it a lot easier for you when you actually are starting to work on this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about motivational techniques, because if you'll see on here we have cost, reward, needs, timeliness, proximity, seriousness. These are all motivational techniques that we can use to try to convince people. And so the first one that I'm going to start talking about is the cost reward incentive. Now for everything in the world there is a cost. A cost is a negative. It's something that you give up. It's something that's taken away from you. And on the flip side of that, for everything there is a reward. Something that you're given, something that you gain, something that you earn, right? If you want to convince somebody to do something, which one has to be higher, the cost or the reward? I think we're all going to agree that the reward has to be higher, doesn't it? You're not going to pay $500 for something you think is worth $300. You're going to wait for it to go on sale, you're going to buy it used, you're going to borrow it, you're going to do whatever you can other than paying the full $500. Now, most of the time when we think about the cost-reward incentive, we think in terms of money. How much does something cost us? But the cost-reward incentive is not just about money. It is about value. What is it that we value? And there are some things that we value higher than other things, and everybody has different things that they value. I think we can all agree that we value money very highly, but think about the other thing that we value really highly, just as much as we value money. And that is time, because we give up time to do a lot of things, and that's a cost. That's a negative that we have. When you go to school, you give up time to work extra shifts. You give up time to work on other classes. You give up time with your family. You give up time to enjoy life. There are things that you give up time. You give up time because you're on the road traveling. Those of you who are on the computer, you give up time you spend on the computer doing class instead of time you could be surfing or playing video games. So there are some of those costs associated with time. And it is very, very important when you are using the cost factor as a motivator that you tell us, that you are upfront with us, how much this will cost. It's going to cost this much money. It's going to take this kind of energy, this kind of time. It's going to take you, you're going to give up your sanity. You're going to have to give up your relationships. What is it that you are going to have to give up? You think about if you wanted to convince people to join the military. What are the costs? What are the negatives associated with joining the military? You give up your family. You give up your freedoms. You are having to follow structured, regimented, directives. You put yourself in the line of fire. You might possibly lose your limb. You might come back in a casket. There are all kinds of, negatives, all kinds of costs associated with being in the military. But what are the rewards? That's the flip side of that. If you give up these things, what are you going to gain in exchange? So just like you're going to be upfront with us about the negatives, you need to tell us about the positives as well. You've probably used this technique hundreds of times. You sit here, you're trying to make a decision, so you write down a list of all the pros and you write down a list of all the cons. That's the same kind of thing here. The costs are the cons and the pros are the rewards. So you need to tell us, what are all those pros and cons associated with your solution? All of those calls to action that you gave us, tell us the pros and cons for them, all right? That's your cost and reward technique. You want to use that one. Okay. Now the next one is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And some of you who have taken psychology or sociology will probably be familiar with the pyramid, and all the way up the pyramid are our different needs. We've learned about it in how in conjunction with the brain, how we think the way we do. Well, this is a great motivational technique for persuasion. So let's start at the bottom of the pyramid, which is your physiological needs. This is your need for survival, food and water and shelter. And it will be, it's amazing the kinds of things that we will do when our survival instincts kick in that we might not necessarily do under ordinary circumstances. I don't eat a whole lot of fast food anymore. I used to eat a lot of fast food, but I don't eat so much anymore for a number of reasons. But when I do eat fast food, my burger joint of choice is Wendy's. I absolutely hate Burger King. I think Burger King is disgusting. So here's the scenario. There was one day when I was on the road from my full-time job, headed to my part-time job, which was teaching at night. And I knew I was starving, and I knew I wasn't going to have a chance to eat until late at night if I didn't get something to eat on my way to school. So here I am, and I'm driving along the road and trying to figure out what I can do, and I see this billboard for Burger King, and it says stress-free drive-through. For most of you, stress-free drive-through may not be a big draw, but for somebody who's hearing impaired, I have a hard time going through the drive-through because I can never understand what they say on the intercom. It's always like, rah, 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 you know, and you end up getting supersized without realizing it because you can't understand what they're saying. So I was like, oh, it's stress-free, but it's Burger King, but I'm hungry, but it's stress-free, but it's Burger King, but I'm hungry. And I kept playing that mind game with myself until I either had to pull in or drive past. I had to make a decision. At the last minute, I pulled in to the Burger King. I was just starving, so I pulled into the Burger King. It was fabulous, the best drive-through experience I had ever had. I could hear every word on that intercom clear as day. So here I am thinking, wow, they've made some improvements to their intercom system. Maybe their food is better too. So I was so hopeful. And I get my food and I get my bag and I get back out on the road and I'm driving with my knee while I open up my bag of food and I bite into my burger and I'm all disappointed because it tastes just like Burger King, which I absolutely hate. But I was hungry, so I ate the food. Now, that billboard was successful in getting me to do something that I wouldn't normally do because I had a need. Had I already eaten before I got on the road, had I known that there was a Wendy's coming nearby, I would have not even given that billboard a second glance. All right? But it was effective because it appealed to a need that I had. Right? And the next one is safety. Safety needs are really important too. That's the next one up on the pyramid. We want to feel secure no matter where we are. So most of us at home, the kinds of things we have might be alarm systems. We might have guns or weapons of some kind. We might have a baseball bat. We might have a dog. We might have a recording of a barking dog. We might have a significant other. Doesn't matter. We have something that makes us feel safe at home. And you think about something like GPS. Most of you probably have your GPS activated on your phones, right? Or you might have OnStar in your car. And you think about this. What is the negative of having your GPS on? What are you giving up when your GPS locator is on? You're giving up privacy. Now, privacy may be something that people value, and they might not want to give it up. You know, there are usually a few students in my class who say they never have their locators on. They don't have their GPS on because they don't want the satellites homing in, and they know exactly where they are right now. That's a value, and it's a negative. You know, people don't want to give it up, or people want to gain it in exchange. But let's say that you are going to go on vacation up some snow-covered mountains in the middle of nowhere. Which one is more important, your privacy or your safety? At this point, probably your safety. And at this point, you probably want to make sure your GPS is working. You probably want to make sure that your OnStar is working. Because if you get, covered in a snowbank, you don't want them to find your frozen body 2 weeks later. You want them to find you while you're still alive, right? So that's what you're looking at in terms of safety. What kinds of things can appeal to our need for safety? And, when we talk about cell phones, you think that cell phones are just about safety. But I disagree with that. Because if cell phones were really just about safety, we'd all have a prepaid phone and we'd stick it in our glove box. And we would only use it in an emergency. So in my opinion, cell phones are really about the next thing up the ladder, which is love and belongingness. Now, this is an emotion, and this is something that has a lot of appeal to people. We want to belong to whatever our group is, our friends, our family, our church group, our civic group. We want to know that we're accepted, that people aren't judging us, and that they just love us for who we are. So this is a very powerful kind of motivator that you can use. It's a very powerful need that we have. And you look at Jenny Craig. If you look this way, people will accept you. Any of the any of the dating, online dating, you'll find your true love. The cologne commercials, the Axe cologne commercials for men, those are all appealing to your need for belonging. And you always see those kinds of things where you have families and they're all happy and it's all slow motion and all that sort of stuff. That's what they're going for right there. And it's a big deal. So is whatever it is you're trying to convince us to do in your solution and any of your calls to action, do they appeal to our sense of belonging? Will they help us be loved in some way by other people? Next up the ladder, we have our esteem needs. And usually when you study esteem in psychology class, they kind of link it together with the id and the ego and the superego and all that stuff. And they say it's narcissistic of you to always want to have esteem to be recognized and that sort of thing. Well, I'm going to disagree, and I think it's a terrific motivator for you to use, because a lot of people are actually very self-motivated. You know, you do something because you're driven internally to do it, right? But isn't it nice, even if you do it because you want to do it, and even if nobody else cared that you do it, isn't it still nice when somebody says, you know what, that was really cool. I really appreciate that you did this and bent over backwards to help us and that sort of thing. You know, so you want to find out if something that you're doing in your calls to action and your solution is going to help us feel like we've been rewarded emotionally in some way. And I'm going to give you an example. And this just happened recently, actually, you guys. I'm not a big fan of shopping at Walmart, but unfortunately, due to financial situations, sometimes I find myself there. Well, I was over at Walmart the other day, and I had to get some change back to pay somebody some money. So I just got some soap and some shampoo. And I told them that I needed to get $160 back. And she said, well, you'll have to do it in two sections. So no problem. So she had me swipe my card twice. She paid me the $160, went on my way, got everything taken care of. When I got home that night, I checked in my bank account and I realized that $100 had been taken out, but $60 hadn't been taken out of my bank account. And I was a little worried about that. I didn't know what that meant. So it was actually in the afternoon when I got home and I looked. So later on that evening, I went over to Walmart and asked for a customer services manager. And I said, I don't think that your cashier actually swiped my card or charged my card because my bank account is not showing it. And she said, well, we won't know until Saturday. This is a Friday. She said, we won't know until Saturday in the morning. And let me go ahead and take your information and we'll get in touch with you if she comes up short. I was like, thank you. I want to make sure that if she comes up short that you actually have the money that you were supposed to have taken out. And I'll be happy to come in and take care of it. Well, I didn't hear anything from them on Saturday. So I thought, okay, well, maybe it was just a mistake on my part, something I didn't see, a delay or something. No word on Saturday. On Sunday, I get a text from them and they say, yes, that cash register came up short, $60. Could you please come in? And I said, absolutely, I will be there. And do you need me to come at a specific time? They said, no, whenever you get a chance. I said, no problem. And they, the person in the text replied, you're awesome. I said, no, it's just the right thing to do. I get over to Walmart to pay the $60, and I go to customer service, and I'm waiting over there, and somebody said, I need to talk to Marianne, I think. And so somebody talks to somebody, and I see all these people, Joan's here, Joan's here, Joan's here. They're saying that. And I see some scurrying and some commotion and that sort of thing. And all of these managers came out, and they said, and they had a bouquet of flowers, and they said, and a $10 gift card, and they said, we're going to give you these because $10 for your gas for coming back out here, and these flowers because we appreciate the fact that you did the right thing in coming to us to let us know about this. And we're going to make you our customer of the month. And I'm like, oh, no, that's okay, that's okay. And I paid them the money, obviously, because that was what I came there to do. And I had no expectation that they would do anything like that for me, but was I flattered? Absolutely. Is that something that's going to make me look at Walmart maybe a little better? Probably. My purpose in making sure they had the money was I didn't want that cashier to get in trouble, because I don't know how much trouble you can get in for being short $60, but I imagine it's not just a slap on the hand at some point. I could care less about Walmart corporate, we know all the families, the richest people in the world and everything, but I care about the people who work there, and I want to make sure that we do right by them. But even though I was driven internally to do that, I had no, motivation to do that, I still wanted to. And it was nice that they recognized that I recognized that it was the right thing to do. So that's an example. The same thing at work. They can't always give you raises, but sometimes your workplace will find ways to make you feel better, to motivate you to work harder, to continue doing a good job, other than giving you a raise. food, donuts in the morning, pizza, a barbecue, any of those kinds of things, gift cards, special coupons, percentages off discounts and things like that are all your picture employee of the month and all that. Those are all based on esteem, and they motivate you to do a better job. And then finally, at the top of the pyramid, we have self-actualization. And what self-actualization means is doing the best that you can, being the best that you can, all you can be, which used to be the Army's motto, be all you can be. Self-actualization means you are trying to achieve the goals that you've set out for yourself. And self-actualization is why you all are in school, because you have plans, you have goals, you have something that you want to achieve, and being a student in school and getting that degree will help you achieve that particular goal. And it's a great motivator. Is that going to help us, be something? You want to, you want to have this title in your job. You want to have this kind of position in a company. You want to make this amount of money. Those are goals, and everything you're doing is to reach that particular goal. So now what I want you to do is I want you to jot down, based on your particular topic and based on your calls to action, what are some needs that are met by those different calls to action. If you need to pause this or something, go ahead and do that. But while this is fresh, I want you to think about that. It may not be all 5 of them, certainly not all 5 of them, but there may be a couple of the needs in here that your call to action is meeting. All right, so take a moment and do that. And then the final motivational technique that we're going to discuss is timeliness, proximity, and seriousness. Now, this particular one doesn't mean you can't be funny. If you're a funny person, please, by all means, be funny. But what it means is that in our decision making, we take these 3 things very seriously. And, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Money. How are we going to make money? How are we going to save money? If I want to try to convince you to save money for the future, to invest, to put money away in a 401k plan or something like that, I have to make sure that you can make ends meet now. You probably don't care about the future. You're too worried about paying your bills right now. But I need to make sure that I can show you how to save that money, how to put away that money and still pay these bills and still have a little bit of extra for fun in life right now, and how to make sure that you're not eating cat food when you're 80. All right, and that would be how do I do that? And, in the now. The other aspect of now is creating a sense of urgency. You want to make sure that if there's an urgent reason for us to do this now, it needs to be legitimate. Because I don't know how many times I see advertisements for free shipping or something like that, and this is one time only. If you don't get it now, you're going to miss out on it. Then you see that same special the next day. We've extended our offer, last 25 available, and you see that for months. So don't use now to create a false sense of urgency, but if there's a real sense of urgency, then that's important. Okay, so now when we look at now, let's try another topic. Let's say that you want us to quit smoking, and I think there's somebody in there who's doing smoking as a topic, so that's something that is obviously going to be helpful to you. Let's say you want to quit smoking. You could talk about the fact that you might develop emphysema or lung cancer. Well, my dad started smoking when he was 9 years old, because that was back in the day when they did that early. And up until the time he died in his late 70s, his lungs were crystal clear. Not a problem with him. He had other health issues, mind you. He had his heart attacks and all kinds of other things, but nothing to do with his lungs. So that might or might not happen. I could tell you, as a smoker, you might cut 10 years off your life. But unless I have some kind of a crystal ball or something, I have no way of guaranteeing you that 10 years, even if you're not a smoker. How do I know you're not going to step off a curb tomorrow and get hit by the bus, right? We don't know those things. So what I need to do is I need to focus on the now. I need to look at all of the things that affect you now, all of the solutions that I could have that apply to now, all right, as to smoking. Obviously, one of the big ones is money. You're going to save money. When you stop smoking, you're going to save money. And when you spend $7 a pack, and maybe you smoke a pack a day, and you've got, 40, 49, almost 50 bucks a week that you're spending just on smoking, on something that's killing you, maybe you might want to rethink where you're spending that money. One of the complaints is that smokers are stinky. So I tell you, stop smoking now. You're going to start smelling better now. And that would be a great technique right there. I grew up with a smoker in the household because back when I was a kid, everybody smoked in their house. Nowadays, people tend to smoke outside. My ex-husband didn't smoke, but my ex-boyfriend did. So, so there was something going on there that I would hook up with an ex-boyfriend, with a boyfriend who smokes. But he would try so hard, bless his heart, he would try so hard, and he might have just 1 or 2 cigarettes in the day. And at the end of the day, in the evening, he would come to me and he'd say, I just want to have one. Do you mind if I just have 1 cigarette? And I'd be like, yeah, but that cigarette is the one that I'm going to smell on you when you come back in. And he'd say, oh, come on, baby, I've been so good. Just let me get that 1 cigarette. So I would say, all right, that's fine. You go outside and you have that cigarette, but the minute you're done, you come back in and you take a shower, because if you don't do that, you're not getting any of this. And I would say that to him because this is obviously the reward that he would get for taking that shower. And you want to make sure you've got those things straight up, right? And he thought that reward was well worth it, believe me. Right? So those are some things that you can do as part of your motivational technique with now. How do we appeal to the sense of immediacy? And the next motivator is proximity. And I hope that you guys know that the word proximity means close. And you want to avoid saying close proximity, because when you do that, you're saying close, close. So you either say you're standing close to or you're standing in proximity to, one or the other, but not both. And what proximity has to do with is, how do we make things convenient? Most of us would very rarely do something that requires us to go trekking halfway across the state or spend hours and hours of time researching. We are probably going to do the easiest way possible with something. And our society, let's face it, our society these days is all about convenience. How can we do it quick and easy? And so you look at something like Publix, for instance. You go shopping for some dinner, you want to cook because, yeah, I'm going to make a home-cooked meal, but you don't want to have to try to put everything together. So how convenient is it that they've got these little refrigerated, thingies all over the store with different kinds of meals already prepared? If you've got a roast with some vegetables around it and the seasoning already in it, and all you have to do is just pop it in the oven and cook it. That's about convenience, and they sell a lot of stuff that way, right? So what is it that you're doing that can be convenient for us? Let's say that you wanted to convince us to vote. You want to convince us to vote. And you do a polling of your audience and you find out that some of the people in your audience have their voter registration cards. So they probably intend to vote. Those are behavior reinforcement people. You want to get them to vote because they probably have done it before and intend to do it. All right? So that's good. No problem there. Then you have some people who don't have voter registration cards, or their voter registration cards are outdated. They might possibly vote, but they probably won't if they have to get their cards updated or have to get cards in the first place. So what you would do with those people, let's say, you could say, well, the elections office is located at such and such address right up on this such and such street. You think they're going to go? Probably not. Because that's a lot of effort, isn't it? It's a lot of time and energy and effort, a lot of negatives, a lot of costs to have to go to the elections office and fill out the application. So we'll kick it up a notch. All right, here's the website for the supervisor of elections. All you have to do is go on this website and you can fill out your application online. How convenient is that? Super convenient, right? Maybe you might get a few more people doing it that way. Certainly more people than who would go to the actual elections office. But let's say you bring in some registration, you bring in some applications with you, and during your speech, you tell those people who don't have cards or who have outdated cards, you say, I want you to fill this out. And when I'm done with class today, I'm going to take it over to the elections office for you. And next week in the mail, you will have your voter registration card. Boom, it's done. And that's what you want to do. You have to figure out ways to make it as convenient as possible for people to do your calls to action. All right? You need to give them as many options as you can. You need to, you don't give them a way out. I will confess to you that my my splurge item, the thing that I like to do when I have a little extra money, is I get a little bit of Botox done right here. And I can just see my wrinkle. I can see my wrinkle. It's making me self-conscious. So I want you to stop staring at my wrinkle right here because I haven't gotten any Botox lately. But a couple of years ago, when I was ready to get some Botox, I went to my favorite place, my favorite medical spa, and I asked them if they had any specials on Botox coming up. And they said, yes, tomorrow we're having a special. It's this much per unit instead of that much. And I said, okay, so I need to come back tomorrow to get this special. And the person at the counter said, yes. As I was leaving, the manager came out and said, wait, we're going to give you that special today. So come back over here, we'll get you all set up. Now, how smart was that? What is the guarantee that I would come back the next day? Even though I wanted that Botox, I wanted it bad enough, maybe I would have gone driving around and found somebody who would have given it to me right then and there, right? So there's no guarantee that I would have come back tomorrow. And I was right there. A business is stupid if they're going to pass up the chance to get money from somebody who has it ready to give. They're just looking for a reason to give it to them, right? So we are all about, in our society, all about convenience. And if you deal with customers at all, you need to keep that in the back of your mind. Customer service is number one. So is there something that you are doing in your call to action that you can make easier for us? Can you find us a way to get to it easier? Or are you going to make us run around all over the place to get it? And then finally is seriousness. Seriousness has to do with finances, health, and family. All right. Now, when we talk about seriousness, finances, we've talked about that quite a bit. How am I going to make money? How am I going to save money? That's a big deal. Our health, we're living longer than ever before, but our healthcare system is in the crapper, quite frankly. And so we don't really take care of ourselves the way we should. Is there something in your calls to action that will help us be healthy? Help us live longer if we do what you're asking us to do. And then finally, family is a huge motivator. People will do anything for their families. They will change their lives around to take care of their children or their parents or whatever family member needs them. So is there something in your calls to action that appeals to that? Making sure that our families can, when you talk about life insurance or something like that, that's all about family right there, because you're dead. It's not going to do you any good anymore, but you die knowing that your family is taken care of. That's how you use that. In the next slide, I'm talking about motivation and manipulation. And I kind of get on my soapbox when I talk about this particular slide, because when it comes to persuasion, a lot of times we like to think that, that people are actually making us do things, instead of the fact that we actually have choices. So for instance, I was driving in my car and my son was in the car. He was sitting in the passenger seat, obviously, and he had a glass of tea. And just as he put the tea up to his lips, I went over a bump and the tea spilled all over him. Yeah, the little kid you saw running around behind me earlier, that's the one. He says to me, he says, "Mom, you made me spill my tea." And I said, "Whoa, I didn't make you do anything. You chose to drink that right at that particular time," right? Well, there was another situation where I had locked myself out of my car. I have a Honda Civic, 308,000 miles on it, and it's apparently the easiest car in the world to break into, and I should know because I've broken into it 3 times. And one of those times happened to have been just before Thanksgiving last year. I'm getting in my car. I put all of my stuff, everything in my car. And as I'm getting ready to close the door because I needed to put something in the back seat, I look up and I see Robert standing at the door crying. And I'm startled, and I have my hand, I think, on the unlock button, but instead I realize I'm locking the door just as I'm shutting the door. And I stopped myself before I shut it completely, so there was a little gap in the door. And I stopped with that. I was like, oh no, oh no. I went over to see Robert, find out what was wrong, got him settled down and everything, went back to the car. Took me 45 minutes that time to break into my car because I didn't have any wire hangers in my house. I have all plastic hangers. I have a thing against wire hangers. So I had to go tracking down a neighbor who was home and had a wire hanger that I could use. So 45 sweaty minutes later, I got my car open. And Robert says to me, he says, "Mommy, I'm so sorry. It's my fault. You locked your keys in your car." And I said, "Sweetie, it is not your fault at all. It is Mommy's fault. I'm the one who did it. You had nothing to do with it." And that's one of those things is sometimes people will either blame other people or blame themselves for things that are outside of their control. He had nothing to do with it. I was the one with my hand on the wrong button, not him. All right? You know, you think about all of the things that we go through in life every day, and we have so many choices. We have tons of choices. You're walking through the park and you get robbed. You get somebody points a gun at you and they say, this is a stick up, your money or your life. Do you have any choices? You absolutely have tons of choices. They're not pleasant choices. I'm not saying the choices are great, but more often than not in life, we have all kinds of choices that we can, you know, okay, am I going to do this or am I going to do that? And then we beat ourselves up when we make the wrong choice, when all we have to do is change paths. We have that option every single day from the minute we wake up to the minute we go to bed at night. We can change a choice. We're not stuck in anything, and we have to tell ourselves that. And rather than blaming the government because we're overweight, because we can't afford to get vegetables and everything, we need to look for solutions that will get us access to the vegetables that we need so we can lose the weight that we feel we need to lose. All right? And so that's one of the things, just, you know, as you as a person, just try not to, you know, you want to take blame or take credit for whatever decisions that you make and not assign them to somebody else. And so when we talk about motivation, usually we're talking about a reward system. Whatever I'm trying to convince you to do is going to benefit you just as much, if not more, than it benefits me. Manipulation is more of a punishment kind of thing. You might get some benefit, but it's really for my benefit more than for yours. That's what we usually think about. So you want to use those kind of techniques. All right. And the very last thing I have in this PowerPoint that you might find fun, if you happen to like arguing, what are some things that you can do to be a better arguer? And I want you to think about this. When people are in an argument, who's in control of the argument? The person who's talking or the person who's listening? The person who's listening. That person is called the reasoner. And if you're interested in debate and argumentation, it's worth looking up fallacies of reasoning. Fallacies of reasoning are fallacies that occur when the person who's listening reasons with that information, usually the wrong way. And that causes them to lead the argument down a path that they will lose that argument. So I have 10 things that will help you when you are in an argument. And the objective here is to win the argument, of course. So I'm not saying that these are always fair techniques, but they are effective techniques. And the first one is soft and steady. Just stay nice and steady when you're talking to somebody. The other person is yelling at you and they're getting all upset and getting all emotional, and you just answer in a nice, calm voice. You don't get all emotional. You don't get all upset or anything, and that makes them furious. And the more emotional they get, the more they're going to implode and then hopefully lose the argument in the end. Get opponents on your side. And this is a powerful, powerful strategy, because even if you're enemies, you can find something in common with that person that would possibly lead to some kind of a compromise, some kind of a way that you can work around that particular argument. And I always tell my students to use this technique with their teachers, with their instructors, with their professors. I guarantee you, if you get to know us, if you tell us what's going on, if you keep us in the loop with everything that's happening, we will bend over backwards to help you, because we want you to succeed, and you've made an emotional investment. You've shown us, you know, what's going on and everything like that, and so we're going to help you. But if you don't say anything, if you just kind of pretend like nothing's ever going on or anything, we're not going to care about you. So we don't care whether you flunk, whether you get your assignments or anything like that. So that's a really good technique that you students need to use with your instructors. Don't attack. All right? Don't just tell somebody they're wrong. If you tell somebody they're wrong, they're going to put a wall up and they're going to say, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. You know, don't be telling me I'm wrong all the time. You're wrong. And what you want to do is you want to show people how they're wrong. You want to explain, well, last week when you did this and it caused this to happen and then we had this kind of fallout from it, that's what the problem is. That's what we're arguing about right now. Chances are they can't argue with what happened because they were there, and unless they're lying about it or it didn't happen as far as they know, or it happened differently in their mind, that's a whole different kind of argument. But you show them, you give them a relay of what happened rather than just flat out saying you're wrong. Don't play dirty. And this is one that politicians use a lot, as we all know. And this is called an ad hominem argument, which is a fallacy of reasoning. Ad hominem literally means to the man, is what ad hominem means. And this is where you call people names, name calling. And I am sure that we are all guilty at some point or another of calling people names, but we do have to be careful with this one, because once you get to the point where you've called somebody a name, you've just lost that argument, because you've got nothing left. You've got no logic, you've got no evidence, that's not even an emotion. I mean, you just floundered when you get to that point. And typically people who experience name calling will just stop the whole argument and then just walk away and wait for you to calm down or something like that. You might resume the argument or not. Listen, that's it. Define the fundamentals. Make sure that you are arguing about the same things. There are lots of times when I have seen people, particularly in text arguments, they're kind of talking over each other. You're not listening to me. You don't understand what I'm saying. That's not what I'm talking about. You're misunderstanding. Those are those kinds of things that happen. It's a great example that's in this slide. You know, how can you argue with somebody that the Bible was written by God if the person you're arguing with doesn't even believe in God in the first place? So first you have to argue the existence of God. Then you can argue whether he even wrote the Bible or not. So you have to take those kind of arguments in steps. Make sure you're on the same page. Stick to the subject. Oh my goodness, this is probably a big one. Right in the middle of one argument, and you say, well, yeah, you did this and you did this. Yeah, okay. Well, as soon as we finish this argument, we're going to start that next one. So we'll put that on the list. Go, you know, from one argument to another, but don't mix them up into the same one, because you might have different winners for each of those arguments. Ask a question. This is called the Socratic method, and it's a fabulous technique to use. So when somebody asks, why did you do that? You can say, well, why didn't you do that? What would you have suggested I do? Can you think of a better technique? You just give them, you know, every time they ask you, then they're going to get, just answer my question, will you? Which, of course, makes them implode even more, and you win the argument. So that's just a terrific strategy. Be silent. Don't say a word. Even better than being steady when you talk is to not say anything. And I bet some of you use this technique. You're just sitting there and you're just listening. And they're going, talk to me, I'm getting so mad at you, talk to me, why aren't you saying something? And you're just going, I'm just listening to you. And they just melt down. And again, the whole purpose of this is to win the argument. The more emotional you can make the other person, the more likely you can win the argument. Because arguments are best won when you stick with logic and ethics. Boom, that's it. Know your facts. Number 2, know your facts. Make sure you know what you're arguing about. Make sure you know what you're talking about, because the last thing you want to have to do is go back after you've won an argument with your tail between your legs and say, oh, yeah, I was wrong. You were right. Nobody likes to do that. So make sure you know all the information in that one. And then finally, because it's going to happen to us sooner or later, be a gracious loser. Know when you've lost that argument, accept defeat on that particular argument, because you want them to do the same thing when you win the argument the next time. All right, and so what you want to do now is you want to think about some of the timeliness, proximity, and seriousness motivators that you can use for your particular topic that you've got some of your calls to action. How can you make it convenient for us to do what you want us to do? How far out of our way do we have to go to do that? Why do we need to do it now? Does it apply to something to do with our family? There might be a little bit of repetition in here as you do these, but you can find plenty of supporting arguments to help with your calls to action. So don't just repeat them. Look deeply for other ones. All right? So these are the things that you need to work on for this particular class assignment. And it'll get you started, because I know your persuasive speeches aren't due for another few more weeks, but at least it'll get your brain going, get your juices, your creative juices flowing, so when you're ready to start working on that speech, you'll already have done some of the work. And I expect to see it turned in. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a holler.